my. I'm somebody nobody's love. I wonder why. Although I know it sounds alarming, I pray Lord bend me.
Ah, bollocks! What's got into you, mate? What the hell are you doing? What's it bloody look like?
Recently, I copped a handful of games from Steam in the hopes that I could find something short and sweet to cover. I'm not sure why, but I wasn't jiving with any of them. I don't think that falls on any of the games. It felt like one of those rainy day moments where I go back to a project I said I do, but never really committed to it. And that's how I ended up playing through The Saboteur. I've sort of covered The Saboteur a few years ago, when I did a passing thoughts on how to get its non-standard game over involving a time paradox. If you haven't seen that video, don't worry, we're starting fresh.
Is this seat taken? I'm not looking for company. You're in Paris, my friend. In this city, no one drinks alone.
The Saboteur is a 2009 open-world stealth action game set in occupied France during World War II. It's Pandemic Studios' last game, and my favorite 7th gen open-world game. You play as Sean Devlin, an Irish mechanic turned driver who left his homeland for reasons. After losing to a famous German driver due to underhanded tactics, Sean and his BFF Jules decide to prank him. Like most YouTube pranksters, they learn about consequences the hard way.
Go fuck yourself! No! No! You fucking bastard!
Turns out his rival isn't just a regular Nazi, but he's a pretty big deal in the Cool Kids Club. After breaking out of their super secret fort, Sean flees to Paris with Jules' surviving sister Veronique and his mentor Vittore. The game begins with Luc, a member of the French resistance, finding Sean at the bottom of a bottle and inciting him to take direct action against the Nazis. And thus begins Sean's one-man war against the Jerrys. The elevator pitch for The Saboteur is, what if you made a GTA sandbox that was also a stealth game set in World War II? The open world doesn't have GTA's level of realism, and the stealth doesn't have Sniper Elite 5's depth, but it's got something that both types of games lack: wiggle room. You ever play a story mission in GTA 5 and do one thing out of sequence, only for the game to go into a fail state? Not here. As soon as the game begins, you can go through the entire map in The Saboteur and not trigger a game over. As for stealth, it has all the basic elements you'd need to call it a stealth game, but you're never meant to or required to complete a mission undetected. In fact, most missions will set you up so that you get spotted. If this were any other game, this would be frustrating, but it's really easy to fight your way out of an alert in The Saboteur. And more importantly, it's really fun to fight your way out of an alert.
Die Verkleidung fällt niemand rein.
Der Saboteur ist tot!
Want something?
So what do you do in The Saboteur? As Sean, you take on missions for La Resistance. You start with Luc, the guy you find you at the bar, but as you progress in the campaign, you'll meet other resistance cells and their leaders. Each mission giver focuses on different aspects of resisting Nazi occupation. One guy tells you to destroy Nazi bases to help the Foreign Legion in North Africa. Another wants you to use a Manchurian candidate to deliver a bomb to an unsuspecting officer.
Nehmen Sie diesen Mann fest und öffnen Sie das Paket.
This sole biddy is concerned about all the French art that the Nazis are destroying, but that flavor text went out the window once I heard this exchange.
Ah, the culture war. Is that it?
Another guy started off sounding cool, but all of his missions were about getting back at the girl who cucked him. One of the major features that the Saboteur was known for was the black and white palette that only highlighted things colored red. Clearly, this is a reference to Schindler's List. Now, aping the visual motif of one of the most heart-wrenching stories of World War II sounds tactless as I describe it to you, but trust me, it works. Once you complete enough missions for a resistance leader, color bleeds back into the area to represent life returning to the city. Seeing this happen at the end of every mission chain is always satisfying, but it's a double-edged sword. This is a 2009 game, and it shows in the colorful areas. It's got that 7th gen bloom that'll blow out your monitor, and the game loses that moody charm that the black and white sections had. What makes the game visually interesting are those transition areas where you shift between sepia and color. It's really cool to look at the skybox in those transition areas. One of my favorite little moments in the game was driving through a sepia tunnel and coming out into a Technicolor wonderland. I felt like Dorothy, but with a car full of pipe bombs. Missions boil down to destroying Nazi bases or killing Nazi officers. The Saboteur keeps it interesting by incorporating every trend in 7th gen action games to create a stealth-light experience. And by incorporate, I mean that it apes them just bad enough to make an interesting blend of interactions. Take GTA 4's arrest circles, Hitman's disguise system, early Assassin's Creed's wall climbing and hiding places, and mix them in with simple third-person shooter controls and a very forgiving difficulty system, and you get the Saboteur. Sean blends in the crowds well enough to avoid Nazi attention, but do certain actions like walk into restricted areas or climb on walls in their presence, and you risk hearing the bongos. If the suspicion meter fills all the way up, you'll trigger an alert and have to go into fight or flight mode. When you confront a Nazi, you can go into brawling mode by holding left trigger. This modifies the face button so that you can punch, kick, and grab nearby enemies. You pick up weapons by pressing the action button Y. Since this is a stealth game, you can't always run around with a gun in your hand, so you can sew your weapons by pressing B. If you approach a Nazi from behind, you can sneak up on them by holding left bumper and do a stealth takedown with either X or Y. Taking out Nazis without using your guns is important, because you can then take their uniforms as disguises by holding Y. Being disguised changes how Sean moves while sneaking. Instead of slinking about, he'll restrict his walking speed to a slow gait. This is important because Nazis become highly attentive when you're disguised around them. Just walking really fast or getting too close is enough to set them off. If you're wondering why it's so easy for the Nazis to see through Sean's disguise, walking around in a colorful sector shows that he only takes a Nazi's coat and helmet, but not the pants. I like that little detail because it easily explains a gameplay mechanic, and it goes along with Sean's slapdash approach to everything.
It's not a great fit, but it'll have to do.
Even if your cover's blown inside an enemy base, you can pacify it by taking an enemy's disguise. Get spotted again, and it'll put the base right back in alert, unless you can find a nearby sirens and disable them. Nazi bases are full of equipment you can destroy with your guns or with explosives. Press up or down in the D-pad to equip either dynamite or remote bombs. You can place dynamite on a surface and stop Sean from igniting it, so you can place more dynamite by pressing B just before he lights the match. Performing certain challenges will unlock perks to provide bonuses to Sean. Some perks unlock new skills or make a new feature available. Each perk has 3 levels, and you won't know what the challenge is for the next level if you haven't already cleared the current level. Although you have free reign to move around at the start, there are still parts of Paris that are closed off to you unless you have the right paperwork. This requires you to contact a local black market and do odd jobs for them to give you access to those areas. It's how the game controls the pacing of the campaign. Buying stuff off the black market requires contraband. You can find it all over Paris in blue boxes. Yellow boxes contain ammo, and red boxes are explosive. But something to note is that you can break open red boxes and pick up grenades or dynamite if you need to blow something up but ran out of ordnance. The black market will also let you unlock 1 level 2 and 1 level 1 perk. I recommend saving the level 3 unlock for the super secret stealth kill technique because unlocking it the normal way is a headache. The one thing I really want from the black market is the ability to buy disguises, so I don't have to hunt down an officer or a soldier before going into an enemy base. Driving feels mostly bad if you're not using a race car. Civilian vehicles have 1940s car handling where they feel like boats on the road. At some point, you can join races in the French countryside. There's barely any rubber banding, and I was able to clear the races with whatever race cars I had available. You can collect cars by driving them into resistance garages. Collect all the vehicles in the game, and you'll unlock the ability to store tanks in the garage. It's not that big of a deal though, because there's a guaranteed tank spawn right outside the city. I call the Saboteur a stealth-like game, because stealth is a means to an end, to sneak into a Nazi base without automatically getting into a fight. You get in, cause a ruckus, and once you do get caught, you start blasting. Sean can take a lot of damage on normal, and this encourages a run-and-gun approach to combat. You can hug a wall and pop out to fire a gun, but why would you when you can just clear a base with nothing but a rifle and some grenades? There's a healthy variety of weapons to use in the Saboteur, but I'll save you the hassle of learning the ins and outs of each gun, and tell you right now that you can carry most of the campaign with the trench gun. There's a reason why Germany wanted to ban this in World War I. Sean can carry 2 weapons at any given time, and there's no size restrictions, so you can carry 2 long arms if you feel like it. If you want to be sneaky, you can bring in a silenced pistol along as a backup weapon to pop Nazis without setting off their suspicions, but it uses its own type of ammo that you can't pick up off of dead Nazis. You can get RPGs in the late game, but if you unlock all of the hardware perks, you can get a Panzerschreck for free in the black market. This became a problem solver for the rest of the game, and the other weapon I always carried was the trench gun. I said before that the Saboteur borrows GTA 4's arrest circles, and after going through GTA 5 again to capture comparative footage, I can say that it's so much easier to outrun an alarm in the Saboteur. That is, if your alarm is level 3 or lower. The higher your alarm level, the bigger the radius for your arrest circle, and the game spawns more aggressive enemy types to chase you. At level 4, you can't use regular hiding spots to avoid arrest. At level 5, the entire map is red, and there's no place you can reach to escape an arrest. There are only 2 hiding spots you can use to avoid a level 5 alarm, and one of those is at the very top of the Eiffel Tower. I found this out after a hectic mission that led me to inadvertently unlocking both Panzerschrecks and the ability to use hiding spots in level 4 and 5 alarms. This is the mission that sticks in my mind when I talk about how the Saboteur rewards a player in being flexible and taking advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. I snuck into a base, found an unoccupied tank, used it to get even further into the base without alerting the other tanks. Yeah, there's tank stealth in this game. And then I fought my way back out while enemy armor was throwing shells at me in every conceivable direction. Doing this kind of stunt in GTA 5 is both a gamble and a time sink if you get unlucky with cop spawns once you break contact. The story is easy to follow, as Sean builds up a reputation in the Resistance. He gets the attention of British intelligence, who use him for their own interests with the promise that they can get him close to the man who killed Jules. While Sean gets in bed with MI6, Veronique becomes more and more radicalized after spending time with Luke. There's an obvious love triangle with those 3, and maybe a quadrilateral if you think Skylar is a potential love interest for Sean instead of just a friend with benefits.
I am told English women are bold on the outside, but warm on the inside, no?
I thought you were meant to be a classy bloke.
Why don't we take Skylar and Veronique up to Le Havre this weekend for a little wine tasting?
Isn't there still a war on?
All the more reason for some joie de vivre while we still can, huh?
I won't argue with that.
Once you rescue Vittore, he ends up becoming an NPC in your garage for most of the game. Sometimes he'll tell you about the races that are happening in the countryside. Early on, Sean gets a close call opportunity with his nemesis Dierker, but that slips through his fingers. One mission felt like it had cut content because it featured a female Nazi who was responsible for Sean's and Jules' capture, but you don't see what happens to her after fighting through a Nazi villa to steal back your race car. Once you break a Nazi scientist out of a Nazi train and bring them to the Resistance, the Saboteur goes into its endgame phase, and you have to survive an assault on the Resistance base. This was the hardest mission for me, and the one that I had to repeat several times to get an idea of where the enemy vehicles would spawn and how to use gun emplacements, because the turn speed on those mounted guns is terribly slow. This is also where the story started to falter for me. Turns out that the head of the black market sold you out to the Nazis. I actually thought this was clever because it reminded me how, no matter what kind of deals were on offer, the guy was a war profiteer at the end of the day. A firefight in some caves leads to Luke getting pinned down under rubble. He gives Sean his gun to finish him off, but for some reason, Sean doesn't have the stomach to put down Luke.
I can't do this.
Compassion is a luxury we can no longer afford. The enemy we face has none.
It doesn't bother Veronique though. This was a weird moment to me since we'd already killed so many Nazis as Sean, but I think it was a way to show how much Jules' death hardened Veronique, since she gets about as much screen time as Vittori, who by now dies while protecting the Nazi scientist and his daughter from capture. Sean goes back to the Nazi base where Jules died, rescues the scientist and his daughter, and then comes back to see Paris on fire. Sean's assassination attempt at the Grand Prix inspired the locals to take arms and push the Nazis out. The game ends with Sean going to the Eiffel Tower and confronting Dierker. The last vestiges of the Third Reich are going into a death spiral and either killing themselves or each other so that the French don't find them. I kinda always knew that the game would end at the Eiffel Tower, since getting the time paradox ending cuts to a fail screen at the top of the tower, and using it as a hiding spot in a previous mission already revealed a couple of Nazis slumped over the bar. The final encounter with Dierker isn't that much of a challenge itself, but the weights built up is satisfying in its own way. Seeing the Nazis fall apart after all of your attempts at bringing them down really pays off. Also, it takes the color bleed mechanic that you're already used to and gives it one final push into Kino territory.
That's tragic. We are going to hell, aren't we, Irishman?
Maybe. But you'll get there before me.
What are you waiting for, mechanic?
Is it over?
No. It's not over. I'm just getting started.
Famous last words, Pandemic. I love The Saboteur. Even though I think the plot and characters go off the rails at a certain point, the overall experience is pure fun. It's a popcorn game, and Pandemic knew this because, despite the bleak oppressiveness that seeps in at a few spots, the game has this pulp action tone that you expect from radio serials or 1970s exploitation films. It's the video game adaptation of Inglourious Basterds that never was. I'm not sure how accurate the map is when it comes to being a perfect recreation of Paris, but all the major landmarks are here that you'd expect, like Notre Dame Cathedral and the stairs from John Wick 4. I didn't mention it before, but this game is also my favorite Robert Atkin Downes performance. He's usually known for Travis Touchdown, the TF2 medic, or Kazuhira Miller, but I don't think he ever lets his Irish lilt slip in any of his lines in this game.
Sometimes racing is politics.
No, there is a difference.
You must forgive my ignorance, Herr Morini. We Germans are a simple people. Perhaps you would enlighten us further?
One's a hobby for rich assholes who can't get laid without a flashy car and a silly uniform. The other is racing.
This must be that British mechanic who thinks he's a driver.
I'm fucking Irish.
I thought Steve Bloom voiced Luke, doing a really shitty French accent, but no, he voices someone even more based.
When this man approaches me to receive my blessing, I will give you a signal.
What would you like me to do then, Father?
Isn't it obvious, my son? In the name of all that is holy, blow his fucking head off.
Play The Saboteur. You can get it on Origin as it's an EA title, but ideally, get it on GOG. It comes with an external program to adjust modern resolutions in its files and includes the adult content DLC that was notorious back in 2009 that removed the pasties off the working girls' uniforms. I've been hard on GTA 5, and I'll make up for that in a later vid. But if you're tired of modern gaming and want to return to a more innocent time, where you can crib from every popular trend and still put out a decent product, then check out The Saboteur.